This is a video about the journeyman boxer. Now, by definition, a journeyman is a tradesman who's quote-unquote undistinguished in their trade and are typically paid by the day. So realistically, in terms of boxing and probably MMA, I would say 99.9% of all professional fighters are, by that definition, journeymen, because we only get paid from the profession via a fight purse. Contrary to being a journeyman, you would be a fighter who is signed to a promoter or at least to a manager, and you are effectively earning a salary in that somebody is covering all of your living and training expenses and probably throwing you a weekly or monthly stipend just to live off of. But in other words, you're not dependent upon that sporadic or just from time to time fight purse in order to earn your money from your craft, which is the fight game. So there's really not any necessarily any shame at all in calling somebody a journeyman fighter. Now, right off the top, I'm gonna just say, hey, I'm gonna say the word journeyman. I'm not gonna say journeymen, journeywomen, or journey people, just because it's easier to say journeyman. But I'm including women in that definition. Now, before we delve into the journeyman, however, there's a really important distinction I think we need to make, because there's a separate category that I call tomato cans. I'll try to enunciate that clearly. So, tomato can. One of our viewers joked that they thought I said Dominican, but no, I said tomato can. This is a quote-unquote fighter who isn't a fighter. This is not a journeyman because they don't even try to practice the craft of fighting. They're basically some random person that a matchmaker or wily boxing coach or somebody basically procures as an opponent to help build a promoter's fighter's record. So I'll share with you my tomato can story, and it doesn't involve me specifically, but it does involve my fight with Stephanie Dobbs. I think it was our second fight in Laughlin, Nevada. That was a great fight, by the way. And as we were making our ring walk, the whole crowd in the Laughlin audience, they're all booing really loudly. And I'm thinking to myself, why the heck are they booing me and Stephanie? We haven't even done anything yet. Well, what's going on here? Do they not want to see a woman's fight or something? And then quickly I said to myself, look, snap out of it, because you got to focus on this fight. So I put that whole booing scenario out of my head and just, we did our fight. And I didn't think about it again until months later when I finally got the VHS tape. Yes, there was no other way to see your fight after the fact unless someone made a VHS tape for you. So literally months after the fight, I got a VHS tape. Someone dropped it off at Gleason's gym, and I took it home, put it in my little VHS player, and watched my fight. Of course, then I was like, oh, I of course I didn't get to see any of the other fights prior to my fight on the card, just because when you're fighting, you're stuck in the back, and in this venue, it wasn't like they had a live feed to any monitors for us to watch the fights going on as we were still in our change rooms. So I figured, oh, what the heck, I'll watch the fights that were earlier on the card. And that's when I figured out why the crowd was booing. They were not booing me and Stephanie. They were booing these tomato can fights that had gone on prior to us. So, for example, there was one, I guess maybe lightweight, welterweight fellow who was in there, and he had on one of those little elastic black knee brace thingies. And so he comes, the bell rings, a very skinny guy, not much meat on his bones at all. He comes out of his corner, his back touches the first rope right next to his corner, and then he moves around laterally along the ropes, and his back touches the next middle of the next rope, and then his opponent, who's the promoter's fighter, fires off a jab right hand, And this guy gets this wide-eyed look, turns and looks at the referee and waves at the referee, and then the referee just waves off the fight. So then this guy starts walking back to his corner, and then I guess he realizes he's supposed to do something, so he falls on the ground and he starts grabbing his knee. So it was like, buddy, you should have done that like earlier, not at this point. It's a little bit too late for that acting job, but okay, you know. So I mean, he served his purpose, right? The promoter's fighter got a first round TKO or first round KO on his record. But then there was another tomato can in the ring for a heavyweight match. And this time, this guy put up a little bit more resistance. The fight went on a little bit longer. But at one point, the promoter's fighter lands, I think it was a right hand, left hook or something. And again, this guy's eyes just get really big. And he falls straight down on his shins into kind of a kneeling position and then touches his forehead to the ground or to the canvas like he's, I think in yoga they call that baby pose. If he were Muslim, he would be praying. But literally he just kneels down in that position and just gets counted out. And I mean, you guys have watched boxing, you know that's not how somebody gets knocked out. That was just a little too fake. So the crowd, I guess, had every right to be upset and be booing, even when Stephanie and I were making our ring walk. By the way, we actually did fight, so the crowd did love us. But my point here is I wanted to make the distinction between someone who's a tomato can. They have absolutely zero interest in learning the craft of boxing. They probably never even trained a day in their life in a boxing gym, and they're simply there to take a quick loss and then pad somebody's record. Okay, so let's move on to the people who actually do train in boxing and therefore make up this category called journeymen. So there's kind of a little bit of a hierarchy, I think, within this broad category of journeymen. At the bottom, I'm going to put somebody who's what I would call a professional loser. And I don't mean like loser in a derogatory sense. I just mean they simply are literally that. Like, there are boxers who fight in the UK who have over 100 losses. I've even seen one person whose record is over 200 losses. So now I'm not sure, how does the British Boxing Board of Control even license these fighters, but nevertheless they are licensed. So I don't know if they'd be allowed to fight in the United States, but they're allowed to fight in the UK, and they do, and they take the L, as we say. Now, I actually, in a sense, have a lot of respect for somebody like that because they figured out how to make a business out of it, right? Because say somebody has over 100 losses, I would hope they're getting paid at the very least $1,000 per fight. Maybe they're getting a little bit more, but that would mean in their total fight career they've made over $100,000, which is really not bad considering most professional fighters make far less. They may not even hit 5 digits, let alone 6 digits in total, like total career earnings. So that would be someone who just, they have to have enough skills to make it look good, but they know darn well that their purpose in the ring is to lose to that other person, and so they willingly do so. Now, nobody needs to get knocked the heck out in order to purposely lose. That person could simply quit on the stool between rounds, or they could do a slightly better acting job than those two tomato cans I just described, because they actually have skills in the ring. They know what it means to kind of take a knee off a hard shot, or to roll with a punch but then fall down. I'm assuming these professional losers know how to make it look like it's a legit fight, but they still know that their job is to wind up either getting counted out or to simply just quit on their stool. Now, next level up from that, somebody who has like just a disproportionate number of losses would be somebody who's more of what I would call a 50-50 fighter, meaning they've maybe got just over 50% wins and almost 50% losses. And these types of fighters can be a promoter's favorite B-side person if they know that this person is reliable, meaning this person will make weight, they'll show up, they'll get all their medical exams done so they get the license, they know how to show up on time at the airport and get on the plane if need be. But many of these, what I call 50-50 fighters, they're very, very skilled. They have to be, because the promoter's counting on them making it look good. Like, they need someone with skills to come to actually fight, but not to put up too much of a fight. Now, should one of these 50-50 fighters get that short notice call, again, a promoter knows that they can count on them to be professional and show up and get in the ring and have the fight happen. But of course, even the best journeyman may or may not be ready for a 10-rounder or a 12-rounder just out the gate type thing on a week's notice, 2 weeks notice, or 3-day notice, or 2-day notice. So typically what will happen is somebody who's a 50-50 fighter will be able to last, I would say, 6 rounds based off their skill set alone. They probably have very good defensive skills. I mean, that's kind of what allows them to sort of stay in this profession and serve this purpose, is their defensive skills more so than their offensive skills. Because provided you don't take a lot of damage, even if you're out of fighting shape, if you can manage to not take a lot of damage and not get stopped, say in the first half of the fight, you can make it look like a viable fight, right? Now, simply because you haven't been sparring and in camp for a 10-12 rounder, after the 6th round, that's when things will start to set in, and we'll assume that the A-side fighter had at least an 8-week or 12-week camp to get ready, and so they should be in tip-top shape, and that's when they should sort of pull ahead in the fight, is after the 6th round. Maybe by 7 or 8 they should be able to stop this 50-50 opponent. Now, I've also seen that one play out, and again, it was actually between two friends of mine at Gleason's gym. One was the contender, and the other was the last minute opponent for hire. And I know he didn't even train for it. I teased him because he flew in and for the fight, and I was like, you train more after the fight than you do before the fight. Because after the fight, he stuck around in New York for a little bit and actually came to the gym and worked out. But he was able to get past the 6th round simply based on the fact that he's very, very skillful, very crafty, and a good tactician. He was a world-class amateur, so he had that skill set to fall back on. Now, after the 6th round, though, he did start to peter out. So by the 8th round, I think his corner just stopped the fight, because he knew what the deal was. His fighter was just going to start sustaining too much damage. Now, finally, in the journeyman category, I guess above the 50-50 fighter, I should add one more thing about the 50-50 fighter. A lot of these types of fighters can also earn a living being a sparring partner. Because, again, they're reliable. They'll show up to the gym on time with all their gear. They'll be warmed up and ready for whoever this sparring partner is that hired them, and they have enough skills to give this prospect or contender, as we say, good work. So sparring partner should be earning, I would say, anywhere from $500 to thousands of dollars a week. It all depends on who they're sparring and what level that person is at in their career. But any fighter with a manager should have a budget for paying their sparring partners, and they should definitely be willing to pay sparring partners. Now let's jump up a level from the 50-50 fighter to someone that we could call a contender. Now, someone who's a contender, I would say, is above the 50-50 fighter, in that they're the 50-50 fighter and that professional loser. They kind of have just accepted the fact that that's their sort of role in this game, that they can eke out a living, as long as they're willing to play that role. But they're not going to get signed to a promoter. They're not going to get, backed up and sort of propped up. They're never going to get the nod, as we say, in a close decision, because their job in this industry is to lose. However, if you're a little bit above that level, and you still have that desire to try to, as they say, make a run at it, there's always the chance that you could pull off an upset and work yourself into what we would say a contender position. And that's exactly what this one fellow did. I think he's a great example of this. His name is Glenn Johnson, and he used to go by Glenn the Galaxy Warrior Johnson. And that's a really fitting ring name, I think, because he was willing to travel all over the place, travel the galaxy to take fights. Glenn is from Jamaica, but resided in Florida, and so he built up his career to be undefeated at 32-0, and then he was matched up against a fellow named Bernard Hopkins, and wound up losing to Bernard. Now, for whatever reason, he was not given an easy sort of comeback fight, and he sustained a few more losses. And from that point, his career went up and down with wins and losses. But he was matched up for a couple of minor belts, and I think one turning point for him was he traveled to the UK to fight a British fighter. I think his name was Clinton Woods or something like that, and they wound up fighting to a split draw. So now in the rematch, the Galaxy Warrior goes back to the UK and actually secures the win. So now he has a minor belt. And this is where the fun begins, right? Because if somebody has a minor belt, a promoter and different boxing commissions can justify putting them in for a title shot with one of their fighters. So Glenn's career again goes a little bit up and down with these minor belts. He wins some, he loses some, he wins some again. But then a second turning point comes when he wins a belt and then gets matched up with none other than Roy Jones Jr. And what happens? He knocks Roy Jones Jr. out. And so that's when he really sort of hit the scene, as we say. And in his subsequent fight, he also manages to defeat Antonio Tarver. Now, from that point forward, again, Glenn's career kind of has its ups and downs. But from that point forward, his losses are to folks whose names you'll recognize, like Carl Froch, Andre Fanfara, Lucien Boutet, and whatnot. And so, I mean, I hope at this point Glenn was really making some serious money, even though he wound up losing to these folks. But I think Glenn the Galaxy Warrior Johnson is a perfect study in how somebody can move themselves from being, sort of journeyman contender status up into, valid world champion. Finally, I'd like to close a little bit with making another distinction. That would be between a contender and a bum. Perhaps made famous by that scene in On the Waterfront, Marlon Brando. To be a contender, that's really what a true fighter is, right? A contender means that you are actually coming with the intention of winning, and that there is there's a real possibility that you could win because you are putting in the work in the gym and you are putting forth your desire and your heart into the ring when you fight. Now, the opposite of a contender would be a bum, because a bum is somebody who has no intention of winning. Maybe they train, maybe they don't. Probably would have had to, at least at some point, have trained, so they have the skill set. But at this point in their career, they absolutely do not care about winning. They're in fact just stepping in there to collect the paycheck and go home. Now, I don't think anybody really looks down on somebody, earning a living. But in boxing terms, if we call somebody a bum, there's a little bit of disdain with that, because we're kind of implying that there's a little bit of trickery on their part going on, or they're maybe hemming it up a little bit too much, or maybe they're fighting a little bit dirty, so that's what makes them a bum. But I think the poignancy in that whole line of "I could have been a contender" is just simply, he doesn't say "I could have been a champion," because that's too much, right? But he could have actually been somebody that people respected because he stepped into the ring to fight instead of being a bum, someone who just steps in the ring to lose and get a paycheck. So who are some of your favorite journeyman fighters? Please let me know in the comments. Thanks for listening. I'll see you again.